you're going to find that procedures and functions are very similar, but a procedure is a bit more limited in what it can accomplish. I think procedures came first and then they made functions later. That feels right for me to say. I have no data on that, so someone's probably going to correct me. But there are there's a lot of similarities. Functions can definitely do more. Almost everything that a procedure can do, a function can do, whereas the other way around is not true. So a procedure is designed to do some sort of action. A function, its general purpose, it can do an action. It can just do some sort of like selecting. It can do basically anything that you can think of in code that you would run inside of a database. That's what a function can do. A procedure is much more scoped down to doing some individual action. Let's just think about our recipes database. Let's say we have a lot of churn our ingredients where images can get created and deleted, and sometimes images are set to null, right? Let's say we wanted to tolerate that sometimes ingredients could be null, so we don't want to set like the not null constraint on the database. But let's say that we don't want to keep that for very long. What we could do is we could have some sort of job, right, that would run in the background that would just go and find all of the images that had null set on them, and then it would set it to some default image, right? Does that make sense? So you have an ingredient, it has an image. For some reason, the image gets deleted. Maybe it gets dropped out of our cache or something like that. So that at that point, for a brief moment of time, whether that's minutes, hours, days, something like that, it'll have an ingredient that'll have a null image, and then at some point we can run a procedure that goes and sets all of those to be default.jpg. That's what a procedure would be fit for. That is that's like the call sign for when a procedure could be useful. So let's run this query right now. Select star where image is null. Right now we don't have any. But let's just go insert something into our database. So we're going to put venison in there. And now if we run that again, we now have venison that does not have an image, right? So this is what I'm talking about. Maybe this would be another case where we'd want to allow people to insert things, and we don't want to like burden the process too much with all of this like setting things. I don't know, I'm contriving a very contrived example here. You would just in your code say call this default.jpg and call it good, and then make image not nullable. Bear with me for a moment, please. Now we're going to create a procedure, and it's going to be called set null ingredients to default. This is not going to be the programming language. This is actually going to be directly a query, so we can say the language is SQL. It's not the PLPG SQL. So all it's going to do is update ingredients, set image to default where image is null, right? It's really just running a quick query. You can use PLPG SQL here, by the way. We just didn't need to. So now I have a procedure here that I can call at any interval. We created our procedure here. We haven't called it yet. We haven't done anything. If we call that query again, venison's still there and has no image. So again, we could use PLPG SQL here, but we don't need to. This is a simple query. If we needed to do some sort of for loop or something like that, you would need to use PLPG SQL. Now, we could have some sort of background job. We could have something in our database, or not our database, but our like app that would like reach out. There's a cron. We could have like an AWS Lambda that runs on some sort of timer that would call this. But anyway, something needs to call this function right here, which is call, what did I call it? Set null ingredient images to default. I'm just going to copy that because I don't want to write it again. Call that. It has no parameters. It could have had parameters. We just didn't give it any, right? We could have made it like some sort of like parameter to like what image that we're going to set it to, but we didn't. That's fine. We're just going to call that. So I called the procedure. Now if I come back here and say this again, it is not null. And if I say select star from ingredients where ID equals 127, which is what we saw right there, you'll see now that it has a default JPG. So we use call instead of select here. That's with procedures you call them, whereas with functions you select them. So we can invoke this procedure whenever we want to. And that's it. Now you might ask me, when would you ever use a procedure instead of a function? Because everything I just showed you could obviously do with the function. I don't know. There's not really a good reason. Procedures have just been around for a long time, so people expect them to be there. There's a bunch of stuff that's built on procedures. They are more limited. So if you believe in like the principle of least power, right, where you're trying to use the least powerful thing that can accomplish what you're trying to do, procedure would be that. Frankly, if it was me, I probably wouldn't put any of this in I wouldn't make a procedure, I wouldn't make a function, I would just have my code do it. I'd write some sort of lambda that would just query the database and then update all those things. Because again, if this lives in your database, it's not in your source control, it's really hard to track that business logic outside of your application. So I don't really suggest it. But I wanted you to know it's there. It is kind of fun. And when I'm doing stupid projects for myself, I really like to write stupid things like this.
Can you call functions and stored procedures from other functions and stored procedures?
Yes. You can do both. I don't know. I assume you can call a function from a procedure. You can definitely call a procedure from a function. Vice versa, I'm less sure. That seems like a cascading effect of terror.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds plausible. Yeah, question, Dustin.
If a procedure or function has to update millions of rows, will it be a blocking operation?
Let me answer that with a hand-wavy response, which is it's not any different than just calling a function, right? So if you have some sort of function that's going to tie up your database, doing it through a procedure or function is also going to tie up your database. So the call, the way it's called isn't going to make a difference in that particular case. The performance profile does not change coming from a procedure, function, or just a normal query. If you're in those kind of cases where you're like updating a lot of things and alter tables and things like that, you need to be more thoughtful than just writing a big query. You kind of have to like do that piecemeal through code.